You've been talking India Ahead, and I'm Saurav Sanyal, and our big focus now comes in from Gujarat. Dead, weak, diseased, and dying livestock abandoned outside the Gir sanctuary in Gujarat are turning the majestic lions into scavengers. This has come to light in a study conducted by the Wildlife Institute of India. The study examined the feeding habits of lions both inside and outside the forest's protected areas, and it sheds new light on behavioral differences among lions inside and outside the sanctuary. Inside the protected area, 75% of lions' diet comprises wild prey that they hunt themselves. However, as they stray further from the protected areas, hunted prey makes up only 20% of their diet, with livestock comprising 70%. What's alarming is that only 20% of the livestock consumed is actually hunted. Most of it is scavenged and comprises dead or dying and even sometimes ill livestock abandoned by local villagers. About half of Gir's estimated 700 lions essentially live outside the sanctuary area in Bhavnagar, Amreli, Porbandar and Gir Somnath districts. Despite a ban on disposing animal carcasses near the forest, locals continue to flout the law. Researchers have also expressed their concern that easy availability of food was dulling the Asiatic lion's natural instinct to hunt its prey. Cubs especially are vulnerable, since repeated exposure to easy food could leave them without this essential life skill. What's adding to the worry is the fact that dogs also prey on dead or dying livestock. Dogs can carry the canine distemper virus, which can be fatal to lions. Incidentally, only last year 34 Asiatic lions had died of illnesses including canine distemper virus or the CDV, the Babesia, streptococcal bacteria and gram-negative bacilli infections. What then needs to be done by all of us together? That's our big focus on the debate this evening. Let me open this up. Joining me on the broadcast is a power-packed panel. We have with us the key researcher who has studied the behavior of lions and the dietary patterns, Yadavendra Dev Jhala. I also have with me noted environmentalist Kavita Ashok. Ullas Kumar, wildlife expert, is with me on the broadcast as well. I am also joined in by Vivek Reddy of the BJP to give us an insight about the tigers, about the center's tiger and lion conservation programs as well. Let me get started with you, Mr. Jhala. Help us understand, sir, what your findings are and what gets you so worried.
I think you're reading much more than what was intended in our study. All carnivores do scavenge. They do not move out. If you get a free meal, they will take it. So there's nothing wrong in large carnivores scavenging dead animals. And they have the digestive ability to digest even decaying food matter. So it is not a concern of the lions eating dead cows which are left there. In fact, the lion population in Saurashtra has increased because the availability of livestock outside of the Gir protected area. In fact, if you remove these livestock, you wouldn't have the lions there. So this is the primary source of food outside of the Gir forest. So that is fine. The question is that the lions in Saurashtra have reached a carrying capacity. They are increasing outside of the protected area. And when they live with human-dominated landscapes, having a large carnivore in your vicinity can create problems, and it does create problems. And that's where we need to look into human-wildlife conflict as a resolution. They do mix with domestic dogs, livestock, they carry diseases, but the diseases are prevalent across India of this type, and most of our carnivores have evolved with these diseases, so they have an immune system which can actually react to it. The problem with lions is that if you concentrate them in a certain area, in too many animals in one small area, then the chances of infection spread very rapidly. The canine distemper virus is like a flu. Influenza just like a cold virus, and it spreads through sneezes, and it's an aerosol-borne disease. So if you have many animals living in close proximity, then they get infected much more quickly, and that spread happens very rapidly. And most lions in Gir are infected, and they have a resistance against the disease. It's only when the virus becomes virulent and it mutates that it can cause mortality. That's where we need to be cautious. So I think we should not, go
Right.
into too much of,
Sir.
worry about the aspect of lions living
Right.
outside.
I get your point. I get your point. When you're talking of, when it gets virulent, that is where the cause of worry is. But sir, help us understand, like, that memory of the 34 lions that we lost, that is still very fresh in our minds. Now, you know the wildlife sector much better than any of us. Help us understand, sir, that when you conducted this study, you also found some kind of a behavior change or a change in the dietary pattern, that the lions inside the forest, they were primarily hunting, but when they were moving out, they were essentially into the scavenging mode. Now, they were feeding on dead and decaying animals, which you say is normal, but then there is always that risk factor when it comes to the spread of diseases. Where exactly, if you could just list out for us, which are the areas that we need to look into, sir, going forward?
So the risk factor happens when we start baiting lions for doing lion shows, which is quite illegal to be done. But what happens is restricts the natural movement of lions. The home ranges of lions outside of the Gir protected area are very large. They are anywhere from 300 to 700 square kilometers. But when you start baiting them, they get limited to a very small area. And that's where I told you the densities go up very high because they are provisioned with food by villagers and because of doing lion shows. And that's where the problem starts emanating, because if you had lions ranging naturally, the disease spread would not be as much.
Right. Okay. So, these are very, very critical points that you brought to the notice. Kavita, Ashok, if I could bring you in. One thing that is coming to the fore, we are talking of the carrying capacity of lions. We are talking of Saurashtra region. We are talking of the Gir forest over here. And as we are putting out through graphics on our screens, that when we talk of Gir, it is essentially divided into 3 zones. For our viewers to understand, we are having those graphics on air. Kavita, Ashok, essentially those animals are known to scavenge, but this is what somewhere is raising questions. As Mr. Jhala also explained, while we should not be ringing the alarm bells as yet, but then there is definitely a cause of concern. Where does the problem lie? He is also talking of the lion density going high, the livestock availability all rolled into one. The lion shows that he is talking about, the local communities' dependence on the forest, the habitation inside the protected area vis-a-vis the outside area. What are the key areas that you think policymakers now need to focus on?
See, I see this as a challenge because I don't think it is a matter to be taken lightly, because man has messed up so much, Saurav, with nature, with environment, that we are leaving no stone unturned. The king of the jungle now is, I could say the cubs are getting lazier, they don't want to hunt, they are getting cooked, ready to eat meals. So, that is not natural. When, as an environment activist, I feel that if you mess up with the forest, how will the lion survive? Ultimately, maybe the numbers are going up, it's tremendous, but ultimately, don't you think we are all messing up with the food chain? An animal which is by nature, by birth, by its own conduct, is supposed to hunt, is slowly taking a back seat and getting a lot of dying animals and dead cattle from the villagers and nearby areas, and it's getting lazier. So, I don't think that it is such a light thing to take, because of course, wildlife century report, the wildlife India, I have also read the report, and I see that the numbers have increased, but I don't think it's very responsible even for the villagers to encourage this kind of a thing, because they don't have a proper disposable system. So, the problem lies even with the disposable of the dead or dying livestock from the villagers' side. Then I think the forest department has to gear up and see how things are going out of balance and out of nature.
So, but there was
because
also
lion is,
now on that point, when you talk of the disposal, right, when you talk of disposal of livestock, Kavita, there was also a court ruling, and the court had directed the state government to ensure that the carcasses, the animal carcasses, the livestock carcasses would not be dumped. And what we are seeing now is that many dead and dying animals or diseased animals, in terms of livestock, they are being left, they are being abandoned by the local villagers. we are also seeing that carcasses are being dumped.
Exactly. But
So
see,
this
that means
becomes
people are not
like
taking
a
the warning seriously.
easy platter for the lions. Now, Ulhas Kumar, I want your viewpoint on this. Now, the court has said something, but when it comes to the execution on the ground, there are multiple slips as it appears now. It has not happened. What needs to be done going forward, because Kavita brought up that issue of that, how the food chain possibly is also that entire sequence of events that also need to be looked into
Yes.
as far as the lion and its natural instincts are concerned.
Yeah, that's very true because, like Kavita said, no, we have already exploited a lot of forest areas, and we have encroached so much of the forest area. That's why see the weed to cultivate might be sugarcane or might be the mango. The mangoes in next to Gir forest are very tasty, and the villagers have exploited that and grown more of mangoes. And because of the villages being there very close to the proximity of these
Clearly,
forests,
yeah.
what we have seen is a lot of dogs are there. That's why this December disease is catching up with the wildlife. Now, what I would say is back and plan of having this Asian because
Sound clear नहीं आ रही, echo ऐसा आ रहा है.
and
Plus the Asian lion is dying mostly of inbreeding also. Apart from all these diseases, the inbreeding is very high because the area is very small. Instead of, so once upon a time we had this lion across the country. So instead of trying to buy an African cheetah for for our forest because we lost the cheetah, we can actually propagate lion in like where it has its own habitat. And rather than just concentrating on Gir forest, because the lions have actually overpopulated now. And though I don't agree with that 435 numbers which has been given by the department, I'm sure that there will be hardly 235 to 300 lions, but still a lot of inbreeding is happening. And the inbreeding is happening because there is no space for the lions to grow more. And these villages
Right.
also,
So while we discuss all this, I think the other issue that we cannot, Ulhas Kumar, and I'll come back to you, sir, in just a minute. We also cannot overlook the other crucial factor, and I would like to go across to, Vivek Reddy on this. Now, the government, Vivek Reddy, on its part, has time and again said that when it comes to protecting the tiger, when it comes to protecting the lion, when it comes to protecting wildlife per se, the government is leaving no stones unturned. But one crucial point that many villagers who have been living for generations together around the Gir forest, they are pointing out that the economics of coexistence in the Gir forests and the Gir forest region, that economics is something, the compensation bit, the livestock, if the livestock are lost because of the predatory nature of the lions, that is something that the government possibly needs to look into and involve the community per se, increase awareness per se, to ensure that the lion is safe in its own habitat, that there is enough food, and these practices which are in fact drawing the lions outside the forest periphery, that they can be stopped. Vivek Reddy.
Yes, I think if you look at the work done by the government, definitely there has been tremendous improvement in the numbers of tigers that has been recently recorded. So the conservation programs are very strictly enforced, and government is encouraging and supporting it and ensuring that it has good results. But the problem here is man and animal conflict, which is generally more these days because of the density of the animals in the forest, and they usually wade out of their forest territories into the territories of man, and man also enters into the territories of the animals. So this requires a lot of community participation. It requires people within these boundaries of the forest to engage and ensure that they don't send their livestock into the forest or it is restricted, and it also requires to ensure that they don't dump the livestock, the aged livestock or the dead livestock there. The government will proceed on these areas given a paradigm shift in the numbers and the fact that the areas of the forest also need to be conserved. I think government will be very active to these live issues of concern, and the scavenging issue also needs to be curbed. What the live kill that is derivable within the forest areas, I think we also have to address that issue, because the live kill that can be derived easily within the forest will ensure that the animals are healthy and there is good propagation. I think these are the multi areas where the government needs to focus, and it will proceed on these areas as part of its conservation project.
Okay, so you are talking of a multi-pronged strategy that needs to be adopted. The community involvement is of also crucial importance. But Mr. Jhala, I would like to bring you in, sir. Now, we were talking of the economics, essentially of coexistence in the Gir forests, of how there have been communities who have been living in and around the Gir forest area for long, and their dependency on the forest vis-a-vis and vice versa. The compensation bit we touched upon, you also touched upon the lion carrying capacity bit. Now, how would you relate the lion carrying capacity, sir, with what we are seeing happening on the ground, which in a way, though we are not ringing the alarm bells, but the fact is that the risk factor when it comes to disease outbreak or an epidemic outbreak, as many are saying, that possibly is something that cannot be overlooked.
Now, if you look at the Gir protected area, the lions have only 250 square kilometers as totally dedicated for lions. That's the national park. The norm for tiger reserves is that you should have at least 800 to 1,000 square kilometers as the core area devoid of people. That does not exist in the lion habitat at all. So the national park in Gir is only 250 square kilometers. The rest of the protected area is a sanctuary in which livestock and people coexist with lions. They are the Maldari. So this coexistence it's not exclusive for lions. So Gujarat has the monopoly on lions, but we have not been able to create space for lions. So the lions have got very little choice but to live with people and feed on livestock. And very correctly said, that's not the natural diet of the lions. It is something which the lions have no choice but to avail of. The ideal situation would be to create space of at least about 1,000 square kilometers devoid of livestock and of people inside Gir, and give that exclusively for lion and the biodiversity of Gir. And that would be the best thing which Gujarat government can do to conserve lions within the state itself. And I think the carrying capacity is a very crucial issue. And it's not only the number of lions, but how these lions live. What quality of life? Are they playing an ecological role, or are they they're surviving on human subsidies? And as it appears today, the lion population, 75% of them actually subsist on human subsidies. And that's not the natural setting for lions, as rest of the speakers did say. Outside of Gir, they have very little choice because there is no other prey. So if we start regulating livestock carcass dumping and all that, then you will see a drastic decline in the lion densities outside. And lions will then start hunting cattle, and sometimes you might even have attacks on people. So this policy which we are proposing of disposing livestock carcasses has to be thought through very carefully, because currently the lions depend on that carcasses, and if you remove them, then the lions will have to find alternatives to feed on.
So, sir, when you are saying, okay, sir, that's a very important point. So, you are saying, that this policy of the carcasses and the essentially the carcass management, that needs to be looked into very, very carefully. So, what are your suggestions, sir? Because this has been reflected in your study as well. What do you suggest now going forward? What should be? You have talked about the need to essentially the core area which is devoid of any human settlement, which is devoid of livestock. That core area which is exclusive for the lions and for the animals, that needs to be expanded.
Right.
Also, keeping
Absolutely.
in mind this particular problem that is coming to the surface over and over again regarding the dumping of carcasses, what needs to be done, sir?
So, first of all, we should create space for lions within the Gir forest. The lions don't have exclusive right over the Gir forest. They'll share it with Maldari. Okay, so when Gujarat was under the central rule, that's the only time when we had a rehabilitation of Maldaris from the central area of Gir and created a national park. Large carnivores don't live with people. This coexistence is a myth actually. It's a sort of more of a co-occurrence and tolerance to each other than a coexistence. And lions and Maldaris have a relationship which allows them to do that, and it has evolved over centuries. But if the lions start killing livestock and go for people, this coexistence will break up in seconds. So one has to be very cautious, especially when lion densities are increasing, that this it's a very delicate line between people's love for lions and people's hatred for lions. So that line should not be crossed, and it should always remain in favor of lions.
Saurav, can I come in for a second? Saurav?
Yes. Yes, please. And Kavita, please come in on this, because this is a very, very crucial input, and you have also been working in this sector for long. Yes, Kavita, please share your views.
So I just wanted to, I missed some of the conversation because of audio, but I want to add one point that see, environment and ecology and living in the forest for the lion, it is directly proportional to the number of lions we will have in the Gir and all over India also. Even if the number is increasing, I think they need more area. So we all, as an environment activist, I think besides saving the wildlife, the lion itself, we also have to save the forest, the land where these wild animals exist in their natural manner, how they want to live. It's not, we cannot, diverge a hunter to a scavenger. And what happens next, I want to ask people on the panel, when the scavenger becomes a man-eater. We have seen cases that from, suppose a tiger goes to a village and slowly starts picking up people. So it can become a habit. So I want someone to, reflect on this, that how do we prevent a scavenger from becoming a man-eater, because if he's already going to the village. So see, there is a threat to human life, there is a threat to forest, there is a forest, or I think the lions need more space, maybe for their breeding, and they could be transferred to other wildlife sanctuaries. So I think the policy has to be looked into a little more. But just by saying that the numbers are increasing, it's very heartening that the government has done a tremendous job, because lion number has increased, tiger number has also increased. We just did a debate recently.
So tiger numbers have increased, and we have celebrated that increase in numbers. We have also looked into the rise in the number of lions per se that India has. But Vivek Reddy, ultimately it all boils down to the center and the administration and the government per se. You've heard some very seasoned voices on the panel. Vivek Reddy, how can you help us understand this? The increasing the core area, so to say, which is devoid of any human settlement, and so that the lion's habitat is protected, the lion does not need to venture outside. How is the government thinking on those lines? We've talked about the involvement of the community, participation of the community, but other factors also need to be looked into.
Well, I think the government is very proactive to protect the forests. That is what it has done over all these years. It has ensured that the core areas and the entire forest areas are protected. This is number one. The second is, since the numbers have increased, it also requires a bit of tweaking in the policy. We will have to ensure that they have more areas for the lions, and if we have to ensure that there is lesser point of collision with man and lion. And these are issues that the government will evolve through, will take care of, and will.
Yes, and that is very heartening to hear from you that the government will definitely look into these issues, because yes, while we celebrate the rise in the numbers per se, we also need to look into the demands that come with the rising numbers when it comes to the tigers, when it comes to lions, when it comes to wildlife per se. We need to ensure that they have an unhindered space where they can live their life on their own terms and not be dictated by what people living around the forest, how they want them to lead their lives. Big questions coming to the fore as yet. Thank you so much everyone for joining me on the debate. I have completely run out of time, but then hopefully the government will take note of this particular point that has now been flagged off by this report by the Wildlife Institute of India, and this report will not end up biting the dust like many others in the past. Up next is India Ahead at 9. My colleague Jujar Singh joins you in just a bit. Stay tuned.